second reading is from Thessalonians 2. Now we command you, beloved, in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, to keep away from believers who are living in idleness, and not according to the tradition that they received from us. For you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us. We were not idle when we were with you, and we did not eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but with toil and labor we worked night and day, so that we might not burden any of you. This was not because we do not have that right, but in order to give you an example to imitate. For even when we are with you, we give you this command. Anyone unwilling to work should not eat. For we hear that some of you are living in idleness, mere busybodies, not doing any work. Now such persons we command and exhort in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. Brothers and sisters, do not be weary in doing what is right. The word of the Lord.
So thankfully, the 2016 election is finally over. And probably thankfulness that the election is over is the only thing that all Americans can agree on. This past election campaign has been the nastiest, most bitterly divisive campaign I have ever experienced in my lifetime. It defied conventional logic and assumptions, and many of the polls were simply wildly wrong. Many of us went into this election feeling that we had to choose between two bad alternatives. And we knew going in that roughly half the country would be horrified no matter who ended up getting elected. So now the election is over, but unfortunately, the issues that made this campaign cycle so nasty, so divisive, so bitter, all of those issues are still there. Regardless of who you voted for, it's pretty clear that in the community of our country, people are fearful. They're fearful of different things. They're fearful for the future. Sometimes they're fearful of one another. In the community of our country, people are divided and polarized. And that's been made even more of a fact by the fact that so many people now live in places where the majority of folks think the same way, so you're not used to listening to people who have a different perspective on things. And I thought about that as I was watching the election results, and I was realizing that when counties, especially on CNN's thing where they show you the counties, it wasn't like, well, many people voted this way, many people voted, it was like everybody here votes one way, everybody here votes another way. And those folks don't necessarily ever hear each other. And in the community of our country, that means that less and less people are likely to listen to others who don't share the same hopes and fears and life experiences that they have. Those are really serious issues, and they seem to have been getting worse with each election cycle. And they're not going to just go away. They can't be solved by anybody we elect or the people that we wish we would have elected. They can't be legislated away, and they can't be solved by a simple change in policy. But after such a long and an ugly campaign, it's tempting to want to forget about it all and just try to get back to business as usual. Maybe we hope things will get better now that the nastiness of the election cycle is over. Perhaps even people who got elected that we didn't necessarily vote for will do a better job than we had hoped. And maybe we're tempted to just come to church and ask God to heal all the bad things that are going on in our country. But as a community of faith, if we really expect God to do something, then we have to be willing workers and willing volunteers who serve God by being agents of hope and healing in the world. We can't simply sit back in idleness and hope that somebody else will take care of it. That's always been the temptation, and that was what was irritating St. Paul in the second reading today, when he wrote this really jarring kind of line that said, even like when I was with you, I said, anyone unwilling to work should not eat. Woo! Boy, he's irritable today. You notice, though, he said unwilling to work, not unable to work. Because in the worldview of many of the early Christians, they knew that Jesus had died, Jesus rose, Jesus, they were promised, was coming back, and coming back soon, they thought. That meant tomorrow, next week, next month, certainly before the inauguration, and so they didn't really have to do anything except sit back and wait for God to solve the problems. And they were living in idleness because they thought it didn't matter if they did anything right now to help bring healing and hope and the life that they had found in Jesus. They didn't think it was necessary for them to do anything to bring that into the world. And if something did need to be done, well, there were others to do it. I mean, they had elected Paul. He was an overfunctioner. Let Paul take care of it. Paul writes to them and says that is not how it works. That's not how it works, even if you think Jesus is coming back tomorrow. And even if your candidate wins a particular election. Being a follower of Jesus means being an active part of a community that works to bring signs of God's hope and healing into the world each and every day. And that is the job of everyone in the community, not just a few who we elect. Next weekend at Prince of Peace, we're going to celebrate our Commitment Sunday. It's a day in our life together where we ask everybody to pledge to be part of the work that we do as a community of God's people next year here at Prince of Peace. And we ask everybody to be part of this and everybody to pledge, because God's work needs everybody's participation. And being committed to Jesus means being committed to being agents of God's living presence in the world around us. It's about being committed to healing broken lives. It's about being part of the solution, not just complainers about the problems. We're called to be workers for God who work together in a community, as part of a community, and individually in our daily lives. And whether individually or together, working to bring about healing and wholeness is often expressed through our willingness to really listen to one another, especially people who think differently than us. And that is more and more difficult in today's world. I have had conversations with many people across the political spectrum who say, I'm not reading Facebook anymore. I'm dropping Facebook entirely because the comments people make are like throwing hand grenades at each other. We simply say, you read stuff where people go, well, if you vote one way, then you're a snotty elitist. And if you vote another way, it means you're a racist redneck. And that's the kind of talk that we have. When we do that, we can't ever listen and ask people, why do you think that way? Why do you feel that way? What's going on in your life that would make you think differently than me? Actually being willing in all areas of our lives to actually listen and hear one another is part of the way that we can help bring God's healing and wholeness into other people's lives. And that's especially important because we need to also take seriously the life situations of people who have different experiences than we do. And that becomes more and more difficult when so many of us kind of live in a bubble. We live in our own communities with people who kind of have the same experiences as us, and it's difficult to really grasp that other people who may be living in our same country and not far away actually have a very different experience of life. As bad as I said, reading Facebook and online stuff, and I'm trying not to do that so much lately, is I was reading one, it wasn't a blog, but it was a online kind of commentary where people were sharing their feelings about the election, and in one of the commentators said, I feel like after this election, my country has abandoned me. People don't care about my hopes, my fears, my dreams, the reality that I live in. And another person wrote on the same topic, and he said sort of, welcome to my world. That's the way I felt before the election. And I don't think either one of those people wanted to disaffirm the other one. But it's just the case that so often in our election cycles, we hear the people we agree with, and we understand them, and we don't hear the people we don't agree with, and so we flip back and forth between, now these people win, now these people win. And part of bringing healing and hope to the world is our willingness to listen to people and really understand the experience of people who don't have our experience, whether it's people living in rural America or people that are ethnic minorities who experience racism every day. Both of those realities are true, and we need to be people who can listen to all of them. And I actually think, as a community of the church, we have an ability to model what it means to be a community where everybody doesn't have to think alike and believe the same thing. So many of Jesus' followers in the early days were very, very diverse. We don't realize this because of the history and the culture that's just not the same. But when you look at the list of Jesus' first disciples, it goes on and says things like, well, there was Simon the Zealot, yada, yada, yada. There's Matthew the tax collector, blah. And that just goes, because we just think, okay, yeah, those are the only two, usually, where there are job descriptions for these two guys. And here's the kicker about it. The Zealots were a guerrilla army that was out fighting the Romans. They hid out in the hills and tried to ambush the Roman army. The tax collectors were the collaborators. They were the people who worked for the Romans and collected the taxes. And somehow, even in that first group of 12 people that Jesus gathered around him, was the zealot and the tax collector. It is way more bizarre than a Hillary supporter and a Trump supporter in the same room together. And it doesn't say they were the former zealot and the former tax collector. They might have still been in those kind of communities, but somehow they found that in Jesus, they were united in God in a way that transcended their political differences, their social differences, the cultural backgrounds that they came from, and they found that there was something more than that, and they could live together and work together, that somehow being united in baptism and around the table was more important. And they were able, therefore, to talk to each other and listen to each other. And for as much as the church isn't much of a big social institution anymore to change society, I think we still have the ability to be a community that models that. Because we don't all think alike, and we don't all vote alike, but we're united by something bigger. And in those moments, we can actually help bring about the healing and the hope that our larger community needs, because we can show people what being community is really supposed to be about. They are hard things to do, but they need to be done to give hope and healing to the world around us, and they require everybody's participation. So this week, as we continue to debrief the election results and consider our commitment to the congregation next year, I invite you to consider the ways in which Jesus is calling you to be an active participant in the life and the healing of the world. And whether you're happy or horrified by the election results, or just glad that it's over, remember that God has worked for you. God has worked for all of us. And especially in times that seem dominated by fear and polarization, that work is really, really important.